Okay. Hey, I'm Mike Harris, CEO of Carolina Bay Healing Waters. I'm going to start with the legend. I'm going to throw a lot of information at you. It's going to go quick, but we're going to start with the legend because that's what everything is based upon. Okay. That's the ground zero where I visited the site and I projected into my subconscious mind. I asked the question, hey, is it possible? What's in this water that could possibly heal these British soldiers that I'm about to tell you the legend for? Okay. And this began a 4-year synchronistic journey and exploring for me in a huge dot connecting journey. And it's truly a gift from God. But let's start with a legend. Okay. As the legend goes, during the American Revolutionary War, it was approximately December 22nd, 1781, according to the records that I've read. There was a battle near Windy Hill Creek in South Carolina, okay, between British soldiers and American loyalists. During the battle, 4 British soldiers were mortally wounded, and the British officers delegated 2 caretakers to bury the wounded. The native Indians, who were friendly to both sides, told the British officers that they could take the soldiers to a stream that would heal them. Well, the British officers didn't believe them. That's why they put 2 caretaker British soldiers with the 4 mortally wounded. And they responded and they said, hey, fine, look, our regiment leaves from the port of Charleston, South Carolina in 6 months. If you're there, that's great. If you're not, well, then God bless you and Godspeed, right? We'll assume something happened to you and you guys all died. So the native Indians took the British soldiers and the 2 caretakers to this stream where they said the Great Spirit gave them healing powers. 6 months later, to the astonishment of the British officers, all of the British soldiers marched into the port of Charleston, South Carolina, strong and healthy, and their wounds were completely healed. And it's like they almost didn't even have the wounds. There were rumors were they didn't even have any scars, and they all seemed rejuvenated. Some of the legend says they seemed younger. Thus was born the legend, and it lives to this day. Now, legends are always born and derived from usually facts or some type of facts, okay, or some form of facts, okay? So from the same exact legendary stream, and I'm going to go into this, touched by the hand of God in the Carolina Bays, we present to you the world's most sought after and powerful water, okay? So you got to remember the whole basis of this whole thing is, how could this water heal these British soldiers? There's documentation. There's very good documentation of these soldiers being healed. There's very good documentation of this battle. So it began a 4-year synchronistic journey for me, and I'm going to take you through that journey, okay? So the only thing that could be in water that could heal torn tissue and DNA are the monatomic elements. That's the only thing that can do it. Nothing else. They didn't have surgeons back then. In 1781, a surgeon was a guy with a hacksaw. So some type of fantastic monatomic element influenced water had to have healed these British soldiers. So the second thing we're going to go into, enter in the Carolina Bays in 1937. Okay, let's shelve the legend for a second. In 1937, let me find a picture of it here. And I know we have it here somewhere. But this is a trial run, right? Carolina Bays. Carolina Bays any day now, right? Any day now. All right. So the Carolina Bays in 1937, there was a private pilot flying along the coast of North and South Carolina. He was on his way to Myrtle Beach. And he noticed a series of hundreds of indentions in the ground. Okay, this is an aerial photograph. And they're oval shaped and they're round shaped. Okay, and they look just like that. Some of them are maybe, 50 yards by 50 yards. And some of them, like Lake Waccamaw in North Carolina, is 5.5 by 5.25 miles and perfectly round diameter. And the Bladen Lake group in North Carolina, I think they're even bigger. But they look like this. They're circles and they're ovals. Okay, they all point to the same trajectory point that they came from. See how they're sort of all in a line. If you draw that line all the way up, I'm going to go into where they originated from. But these are called the Carolina Bays specifically because there's a certain type of bay tree found growing in, and it says over 500,000 mysterious oval-shaped depressions located in Georgia, but mostly in the Carolinas, a little bit in Virginia. Some of them are in Florida. Most of them are in North and South Carolina. Okay. Now, where do they come from? How did they form? How do I tie this into the legend that healed these soldiers? Okay, these British soldiers. Well, I'm going to do that. Okay. So everybody in 1937, when they had these, this pilot went back and reported everything. Well, that started just, from what I understand, it was just a huge event. I mean, people started talking about, meteor impacts and all kind of crazy things. And the Carolina Bays, for a very brief time back then, became quasi-famous, I guess you could say. All right. But there was something that Maine science discovered. And this is where a case where mainstream science actually got it right, studying the Carolina Bays. By the way, the Carolina Bays have really only started, we've only really studied them since probably the 1950s or 60s, maybe even later than that. Okay. So there's something called the Saginaw impact. Okay. And this is where I think mainstream science got it right. Approximately 5 to 15,000 years ago, they're not sure. Okay. A very, very massive event occurred. Ground zero is approximately where Saginaw, Michigan is. Mainstream science says a comet or a meteorite hit Saginaw, Michigan. Now, they're half right. The impact zone is right on Saginaw, Michigan. Okay, right exactly where it's depicted right here. However, I'm going to later tell you that it was not a comet. It was not a meteorite. It was not any of those things. Okay, the Laurentide ice sheet at the time probably did extend down. I don't know if it extended down to where the Great Lakes are. They say that the mainstream science says the Laurentide ice sheet receded back and it formed the Great Lakes. That's not what happened. Not in my research, the physical evidence, that's not what happened. Okay. So we had this impact here, and then we have and this is a classic cavitation explosion effect. Okay. And I'm going to tell you the medium that does that. Okay. But this was a classic cavitation explosion effect, and it formed the Carolina Bays. And those lines from the oval shaped and the circle shapes of the Carolina Bays go right back to the trajectory of the Saginaw impact here. So they got it right on those regards. However, it was not a giant meteorite. Let's talk about a meteorite first of all. The biggest thing where mainstream science is dumbfounded is they're saying that it was either a comet or a meteorite. Well, no. There's no physical evidence of a hypervelocity impact. If you had an object this massive and big hitting there, there'd be a Grand Canyon right there right now. Okay? And there's not. Secondly, if it was a meteor, a giant meteorite or asteroid, you would have billions and billions of particles all over the place, especially in the Carolina Bays. You'd have chunks of, the basalt everywhere that they're made out of. You don't have anything. There's nothing there. Nothing. Zero, nada. So, folks, let me tell you what hit there. Okay? The only logical conclusion of what hit there is a giant chunk of ice hit right on Saginaw, Michigan. Okay? It came from the Dome of God, approximately 72.5 to 75 miles right from where we are right now. Okay? It was about half the size of the continental United States. Yes, that large. It fell from 75 miles high. It was not a hypervelocity impact, as the physical evidence shows. And when it hit, ice performs a perfect cavitational shrapnel explosion effect. Okay? We've all dropped ice from like a big chunk of ice, like onto your driveway or something, throw up and drop it, and you'll see how it explodes like that. It's called a cavitation explosion effect, and it's quite effective. God's weapon of choice for destruction or creation is ice. Okay, and historically, we're going to show where about every 3,500 miles, every 3,500 years or so, God defrosts the freezer. It comes down. Okay. So, and it was also something, I'm going to throw another caveat in there. It was also something called fire ice. Okay. And we're going to get into that as well. So this is what occurred. Mainstream science got it half right, but it was this fire ice that hit and then impacted and formed the Carolina Bays. It burned its way into it harmonically at 110 hertz on a scale beyond imagination. It was fire ice. I'll go into that. So, and by the way, the rest of it melted over here. This blew out. This was a large chunk here, and it melted and burned its way into and made the Great Lakes, and that's how they were formed. Okay. It wasn't the Laurentide ice sheet that receded and this melted. No. If you look at the depths of the Great Lakes and how they were formed, it was not there. It's physically impossible. No, this was ice from the Dome of God, this fire ice, this super compressed 4,000 degree ice. Yes, 4,000 degree ice that was on fire. I'll get into it, I promise you. And formed the Carolina Bays. Okay, so we have mega cryometers as supporting for that, right? Where else have we seen this type of shrapnel effect? Where else have we seen? Hang on. Where else have we seen something that is very familiar to the ice impact? I'll tell you where we've seen it. We saw it in Tunguska. Okay, Tunguska was like a little mini explosion. All right. Let me switch this over a little bit. We can see a little bit better. There we go. See on Tunguska, it did the same type of thing, right? It hit, it blew everything out. The History Channel actually got it right. Okay. The History Channel said, it took 13 years for the exploration team to get there. When they finally got there, it was in like 1911, 1913, something like that. When they finally got there, they looked at, they had a sketch artist, and he drew the sketches of the splay, the spall effect, and the damage of the trees that were laying down. It looked just like an ice cavitation impact. But there's one thing the History Channel said, and they goofed up. They later, I think, rescinded it. They presented it to on cable TV, and then they took it off because they said when the expedition party got to ground zero on the Tunguska event, they got to the where they actually thought and knew it was ground zero impact zone. They were puzzled because there was a 2-story giant ball of ice in the middle of it. And I think on later versions they edited that out. Thank you, History Channel. Okay, so we've seen this physical type of impact before. We know it's ice. We know it's done that way. We know that's God's weapon of destruction. We know that's God's weapon of creation. Okay, mega cryometers. We've got that. Now, what about this fire ice? Mike, are you kidding me? What about this fire ice? You telling me ice can be on fire? Come on. Ice can be on fire, Mike? Are you serious? Ice that's hotter than the sun.